Hello and welcome to TapeDeck Sessions with me, Josh Hayes, brought to you by TapeDeck. TapeDeck is the new online platform that connects casting directors with actors and creatives to receive, organize, and view self-tapes on one easy-to-use platform. Thank you very much for joining us. Here on TapeDeck Sessions, we chat to some of the industry's most exciting actors, agents, casting directors, and creatives about their careers. Today's guest is a multi-award-winning actor and photographer, born and raised in Newcastle upon Tyne. An actor for 25 years, he has performed in over 30 television shows and films and over 50 plays since turning professional in 2000. He's probably best known for his work on two of the country's leading soaps, Coronation Street and Emmerdale, in which he appeared for over 750 episodes and for which he won numerous awards. He's currently starring in The Winter's Tale at the Tobacco Factory in Bristol. It is our great pleasure to welcome to TapeDeck Sessions, Mr. Bill Ward.
That's quite an intro. Thanks. Thanks for that, Josh.
I feel like everyone's town crier.
I might hire you on a daily basis, actually.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm very cheap. Don't worry.
Yeah, that was brilliant. Thank you so
I have
much.
a bell. I will travel.
Brilliant. Great to see you, Josh.
Yeah, you too, mate. So, Bill, we ask all of our guests the same question. Take us right back to the very beginning. Tell us how you got into the industry.
Gosh, well, I was late. I was a late starter. So I started professionally when I was 32 or 33. I put myself through drama school when I was 31. I did a one-year postgrad at a place that doesn't exist anymore, actually. The Actors Company, which was in Shoreditch, which was brilliant. It was a kind of hardcore Stanislavski place. We did 40 hours a week, but we did it on a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So we were working 9 in the morning till 10 at night with occasional top-ups on a Thursday night. So it was quite hardcore, but what it did do, it was a bit like the Poor School. It was a one-year postgrad, and it kind of meant that you could work during the week to pay for drama school. And for so many people, one of the problems with drama school is that it's prohibitively expensive. And so if you've got a way of earning money or a career, and for me, I'd come from advertising. So I worked in advertising for 10 years before I was an actor. I worked at two still very big, worldwide top 20 advertising agencies as an account director and as a strategic planner, kind of working out what makes people buy things, essentially. And so for me, I'd always wanted to be an actor, always. I'd done loads and loads at school, loads and loads at university. In fact, I'm speaking to you from Bristol, which is where we live. And I was a student here years ago. As you say, I'm from the Northeast originally, but I always thought I'd be back in this city. And I've got a history degree, and my history tutor when I was here was an ex-actor. And so he was a wonderful man, Dr. Pemble. And so I would do lots of sport and lots of plays during the term time. And then in the holidays, I'd catch up on all of my essays. And as long as I handed everything in at the start of the new term, he didn't mind. So it was great. So at university, I just did a bucket load of plays. I did about 12 while I was at uni here. And then I even did a bit of Amdram as well when I was doing advertising. But that was difficult because advertising, you can often work till 3 or 4 in the morning. I was doing it sort of back in the heyday, the late 80s, early 90s. And it was kind of the whole work hard, play hard. Sometimes you'd, do very long lunches from 1 o'clock in the afternoon till 5 or 6, and it was really messy. But the other side of that coin was they expected you to work till sort of 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, as and when you needed to do it. So in that kind of a way, I'd always wanted to do it. And I went traveling. I worked in advertising for about 6 or 7 years, went traveling, came back, thought I might be a radio journalist for a bit, got into all sorts of places. But the thing that kept on going in the back of my mind, and actually 2 weeks before I was due to start a brilliant radio journalist course down in Falmouth, 2 weeks before I was due to start, I found myself looking at adverts in the back of the Stage newspaper. I'm sure everyone who watches your webcast or whatever we're calling this these days, I'm very old-fashioned. But you'll know what the stage is. The industry magazine, still the leading industry magazine, and I was looking I found myself looking for drama school adverts in the back of that, and I was sort of coming up to 30 at the time, and I kind of thought, well, if I'm going to make a big career change, I better make sure I do the right one. So I sort of went back to advertising for a couple of years, saved up some money, put myself through drama school, and came out when I was 33. And what's interesting about that is that when you come out at 33, you are up against people who have got a 10-year CV. And so that makes life quite tricky in one kind of a way, because you've got loads of people who've been to fashionable drama schools, got masses of experience. The flip side of that coin is there's a subworld of work out there, the fringe, that those same people don't really want to do, because or a lot of them don't, because it's very badly paid. So what I did was, when I left drama school, I did all sorts of stuff. I learned a lot of craft in terms of filming from doing a lot of stuff at film schools and final year projects at film schools. So I got up my kind of, because we weren't taught television acting at all, apart from one lesson where the head of our drama school brought in a video camera, and that was it. But I mean, it wasn't set up for that. We were more sort of theatre, more kind of theoretical. So I had to learn the craft of television acting myself, and I did that by doing lots of sort of final show, final project stuff for film schools, and also I did lots of classes at the Actors Centre in London, which I'm not sure they do the same. It's become a bit of a producing house, and there's been a lot of talk about it getting back to being a kind of a place where actors can kind of hone their craft and get up to speed on things that they might have missed or haven't done for a while. And I learned so much there. I did television classes there, I did Shakespeare classes there, I did audition classes there. I found it really, really useful. So that my first sort of 2 or 3 years coming out of drama school were a combination of working in the advertising industry as a freelancer to earn the money, working in fringe at night. One of my first gigs was doing a Christmas show at Battersea Arts Centre, a Christmas carol we did, and it was a 4-month gig, end of October to the end of January. We got paid £40 for the whole thing. That was it. And so you kind of go, so you have to, at the time, I had to find another way of earning a living. So I was working for ad agencies during the day as a freelance, doing fringe at night, getting experience that way, and then topping up my skills, going to the Actors Centre as and when I had the time to do it. So that was my first sort of 2 or 3 years really in the business, 3 or 4 years maybe. And so that was me getting started really.
Wow, what a fantastic story. I'm really interested in Bill, in that, because that is obviously, that's not the conventional way of people entering the industry. You know, 90% of actors out there may have started when they were 17, 18. Do you know what I mean? Or done it when they were children and gone through. What I'm really interested in is that tipping point, that transition when you knew you'd always wanted to be an actor. Can you tell me about the moment when you decided, right, I'm going to go for it, I'm going to do it? What was that like?
I was on a hill.
That's great, Bill, but tell us about the transition, please, mate.
In Mull, on the west coast of Scotland.
Of course you were. Aren't we all?
And I just knew I was about to go to this the journalist college, and I just knew it wasn't quite right. I'm just not hard-nosed enough. I just don't want to put people in difficult positions and ask them difficult questions. I try and go through life as much as I can in a positive kind of a way, really. And so I just kind of knew my interest in the journalism thing, incidentally, would have been to do things like documentaries and looking under the bonnet at stuff. I was going to going to train to be a broadcast journalist. That's the course that I got on, and my interest was very much in that kind of a thing. So as opposed to the more sort of harder edge newsy stuff.
Interrogative.
Yes, exactly. And I'd done news. I did work experience at Capital Radio for 3 months, and so I'd seen that kind of up close, and it wasn't really me. But I'd always wanted to be an actor, and it's interesting because the source material is quite similar to a lot of what I'd done previously, the history degree. People tend to think of history in terms of dates and what happened, but actually it's all about why it happened, and who the main players are and why they do what they do. And advertising, similarly, it's got a reputation for just selling stuff at people, but it's not really about that. It's why people buy things. The advertising agency that I worked for BBH, Bartle Bogle Hegarty and Saatchi & Saatchi, and BBH in particular were very sort of formative in terms of, for me, in terms of how I kind of thought about the world, and particularly the world of advertising. And they had one of their sayings was, "We don't sell, we make people want to buy." And part of that was kind of around sort of how people, just giving people things that they want. And finding reasons why people want things. So a lot of my training, both in history and in terms of advertising, is getting inside the minds of other people, really, and finding out why people do things. And that's always been the thing for me that has fascinated me about acting, is getting inside other human beings, if you like, and working out why they do what they do. Because what's interesting about acting for me is that in a kind of, as normal humans, you have a thought and then the words come out of your mouth. What happens in acting is you've already got the words, and what you have to do is pre-rationalize the thoughts. And so I kind of love that process, because you get not a blank sheet of paper, you get a full sheet of paper, you get everything. But it's almost like a mouse and cheese, and you're like starting with the cheese and you're trying to work back to which mouse it is that gets the cheese. And so I kind of like that process. You start at the end, but it's up to you as an actor to go back all the way to the beginning. And there are so many different paths that you could choose, and I love the freedom of that you can decide who this person is. You've got your given circumstances in the play or in the film script about who these people are, who this person is, where they've come from, who do they know, how old are they, where do they live, all of these kinds of things. But so much of their world you get to explore and you get to decide. So I love the freedom of building characters. I love the freedom of sort of, of making a world in which these characters exist.
You speak with such passion. It's wonderful to hear, actually. And how was, I mean, it's such a brave thing to do at, almost 30 years old, even though that is relatively young, it's still also well into someone's career. And it's an incredibly brave decision to make, to go, right, no, I'm going to actually do what I really want to do and make a success of it. How did you find the transition?
Yeah, it's a good question. I was lucky in that I was single at the time, and I didn't have any dependents, so the only risk was mine. And it's an interesting question, actually, because if I had a couple of kids, maybe as I do now, I'm not at all sure that I would have done the same thing. So I was in a position of freedom in a personal way. So I don't mind eating baked beans for 6 months if I have to. I really don't mind, if it's worth it. If I'm learning something or if I'm trying something. And for me, the important thing with the acting thing was just to have tried it. It was less important what happened after I tried it, much more important to have tried it and see what happens. And so for me, I didn't really matter. I didn't really mind if I'd crashed and burned. And actually, in lots of ways, I wasn't expecting to make a career out of it. What I thought I was probably going to do was apply the skills that I learned in drama school to the skills that I already had as an advertising professional, and run things like presentation skills courses, to work in the sort of the workshop related industry. And there's a big one around marketing and communication industries. I thought I might end up doing that. And to a certain extent, I did do that actually when I was freelancing in my first sort of 3 or 4 years as an actor. I did do that. I did run presentation skills courses, and I did sort of run courses on creativity and all of those kinds of things. But so the only risk was mine. And so in that kind of way, I didn't mind it. And all that was important was to me was that I'd given it a go. It was an itch that I really, really needed to scratch. And it's just that sense of what if. I cannot stand what ifs. I'd much rather know what happens. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even if the answer is not what you want, or I'd just like to know. And then you can kind of cross it off. It's like hypothesis testing. You cross it off and you move on and you try something else. But I just needed to know.
And I mean, it's such a phenomenal story, I think, for especially, I don't make this for young actors at all, but I think it's such a great story for younger actors to hear, of going, you know, this is how I went for it, and this is how hard I was prepared to work to come at it. Did it live up to expectation? You know, was there a point where you thought, actually, now I'm 6 months in now and I'm loving this, I'm eating baked beans, I'm working 22 hours a day to make it work? Was there a point where you went, actually, I could do this for the rest of my life? Or was it a slower burn than that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Because I came from a quite, at the time, sort of unfashionable drama school, for our end of year show, we knew we were going to have to generate getting the casting directors in, getting the agents in. So we wrote loads of letters. And I actually, because of my advertising background, I sort of organized via an old friend of mine to get the sort of the finished pamphlets printed and all of the stuff, all of the marketing materials for our shows printed. And then we wrote a lot of letters, like 500, 700 letters. And that's something that stayed with me throughout my sort of career. I write a lot of letters. I write a lot of emails, even now. Not all of the time, but I've certainly written a lot of letters here doing The Winter's Tale at the Tobacco Factory, just because you can often remind people, that you exist, because there's so many of us. There's so many of us, and so many brilliant actors out there, so many. So you're just, and it's part of the old advertising training for me, which is what we used to talk about a lot, is about getting your brand to the front of people's minds, because brands sit in the back of people's heads. People may have awareness of you, but your brand sits in the back of people's heads. And what you're often trying to do in the advertising world is get the brand that you happen to be advertising. We advertise things like Cadbury's and Arthur's cat food and things like that, which to get it from the back of people's minds to the front. And I'm often thinking that that's what I'm partly trying to do as an actor. And I'm not very big on the whole brand thing for actors. Younger actors are much better at that kind of a thing than me. But I am interested in sort of reminding people that I exist. And the other thing that I'm interested in is reminding people that I might do things that they didn't know I did. And so, because what happens quite a lot in this industry, and you'll be aware of it talking to all of the people that you do, is, and your own experience as an actor, is that people try and put you in boxes, whether that's consciously or subconsciously. That's kind of what happens. And the joy of acting for me is the freedom of it, the ability to travel across genres and across disciplines. And what I'm keep trying to do is keep as many doors open as I possibly can for as long as I can. So if you've done, for instance, and you mentioned earlier, I've done quite a lot of television acting, soap acting, although that's not what I did at drama school at all. I kind of taught myself to do that before I did it, and then on the job, if you like. After you've done that, then for me, a lot of what I was trying to do coming out of the soaps is do something completely different, just to remind the casting fraternity and the wider business that there are many other things that you can do. So coming out of Coronation Street, for instance, which I did for 3.5 years, 450 episodes or so, I got offered quite a lot of work which was very similar to what I'd been doing in Coronation Street, and it was my choice to leave Coronation Street. So if I'd wanted to do that again, I would have stayed in Coronation Street doing that thing, and I loved it. Incidentally, I loved that show, and I loved that character. I played Charlie Stubbs, who was a violent, abusive human, a hideous man, but from an acting point of view, fascinating. But if I'd wanted to carry on playing those kind of characters, I'd have stayed in the show. So I kind of did something that I very rarely do, which is sat on my hands and turned work down. I cannot stand turning work down. I cannot stand it. It's a really difficult feeling for an actor, because people want you to do stuff and you're interested in the project often. But I kind of thought, no, in a long-term career way, I really have to do something different. And then about 3.5 or 4 months later, Spamalot came up, which was in the West End at the time, second run cast. There was a cast change, and yeah, so the track of Lancelot was coming up, which is just such good fun. You get to do the Knights of Ni, you wander around in spandex with fruit on your head, just absolutely glorious. Which, for me, having come from a world of playing this really dark and abusive man, to do to do a spandex wearing musical was literally all of my sort of Christmases come at once. And it was a really, really useful marker in the sand for me, because you can't, if you can do the dark and abusive thing, and you can do the dancing around with fruit on your head thing, that kind of means by sort of association that you can probably do everything in between. So it was a really useful gig for me in terms of putting a marker in the sand about the other kinds of things that I can do. And also it was doing theatre, which is my training, and so and it was just a reminder that I can do that kind of, and I do and I love to do that kind of stuff. So
yeah, it's fascinating hearing you talk about your career, Bill, because the constant theme of really hard work shines through. And I loved what you said about, because that was your training, because you didn't go to a fashionable drama school at the time, you had to work harder. You didn't really have a choice. I wonder, has that sort of approach fed its way through the rest of your work and how you approached work?
Yeah, I suppose I like the work of acting. I like the research as much as anything else. I really love it. I love sort of getting under the skin of stuff. So I read a lot. That's how I generally do it. I read a lot of books. I'm just reading one, that the Time Traveler's Guide to Elizabethan England, now that we're doing, which is fascinating, and also because I've got a history degree, and that kind of stuff never leaves you. That kind of sense of just wanting to get under the skin of something. So yes, I do a lot of that, and I do like to prep for stuff. I do like to know that the sort of the world of the character, if you like, and the world of the play. And I'll read a lot around those kinds of subjects. I did Jimmy Porter in Look Back in Anger for Northern Stage quite a long time ago now. But I read loads of books about kind of 1950s Britain at the time and political thinking at the time, because Jimmy Porter was very sort of driven as a political animal. And so, yeah, and I love to do that kind of thing. And so, yeah, I think that's right. It's certainly for me. But then by the same token, there are some brilliant actors who I know, wonderful, brilliant actors who just make it up on the spot.
They're incredible, aren't they?
Yes, just these extraordinary humans. And I also love and admire that. But what I've learned over the years is I can't do that. My skill is doing the work and doing the hard work. And that whole thing about sort of characters being icebergs, and you see like the top tiny little pointy bit. But actually, I spend a lot of my time filling in the stuff below the water that you can't see. And that's what I like doing. And it generally is sort of, the more of that I can do, the more I feel it stands me in good stead.
And it's really interesting that, because having done telly and I've worked on soaps, and I personally think as an actor, soaps are among the most challenging work you can ever do, because you get the script on, especially if you're a recurring guest. I think it's even harder if you're a regular. You get the script on a Friday, you're shooting it on the Monday, you get to practice it in the bath a few times, and then you turn up, you meet the actor for the first time, you then get the script, you run lines, on set, you do a quick run through for the crew, and then bang, you're on, and then it's on national television.
Yeah.
It's such a challenge. So with that in mind, with the way you like to approach work, how did your approach to telework develop over the years as you got more of it and as it became a full-time thing for you? How did that change?
Yeah, that's really interesting. What was interesting, my experience, what you've just described was absolutely my experience of starting Coronation Street, which I did. I did that 2003 to 2007. And literally that's word for word my experience of starting. So I was shooting a fish sauce commercial out in Amsterdam.
I remember it well.
Massive in Europe. And and when I got the job, and I think it was on something like a Wednesday, and I had 24 hours to decide. And I came back to and I came back to the UK on a Thursday night. I got the scripts on a Friday. I read them on the Saturday, went up to Manchester on the Sunday, and started filming on the Monday. That was my introduction to Corrie. And it's absolutely. And what was really interesting about those scripts is I couldn't find my character in them, because what had happened, I'd been auditioning for a couple of screen tests over the previous 2 months, and the character had a different name. I think it was called Dave Mason. So I was looking for Dave Mason's name in the script. I couldn't find it. And they changed it to Charlie Stubbs because I think there was a local builder in Manchester or somewhere nearby who was called Dave Mason, and they went, wow. You can't. Yeah. So I couldn't even find my character's name. And that's also something quite interesting, because the name of a person changes who they are. And people have names, are born with names, and they don't suit them, so they change them or they'll shorten it. So I don't know if it shows on yours. William Ward is what is coming up. Yeah. But I'm Bill Ward to most people, and I kind of like that. It's kind of it's shortened. I'm William or Will or in the Northeast. Yeah. But here down here I'm Bill, and you just kind of you change things. So the name of somebody is important, I think, and so the Charlie Stubbs, the E part of the Charlie Stubbs gave him a little cheeky kind of a thing that Dave Mason doesn't automatically have the same. Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
These tiny little things make a difference.
It invokes a feeling, doesn't it? And I think it invokes something in you, that name, the change.
Yeah, but what was interesting about him was that when I'd read for him, he was quite a dark character. But when I got to the show itself, they kind of said, we've just had a couple of dark characters in the show, and we don't want to go down that route again. Could you just sort of could you look to make him sort of, I don't know, slightly cheerier, slightly more everyman, slightly more. And what was interesting about that is what I'd sort of found in him was I like edges in characters because it gives you something to aim for, as opposed to sort of an amorphous thing in the middle. And when they started writing for him, I started writing some darker stuff for him after 18 months, and I found him much easier to play at that point, because all of a sudden I had clearly defined edges that I could reach. And that's when, also interestingly, and to get back to the original point of your question, that's when I could start doing a lot of research, because he was an abusive man, and they were starting to move the character in that direction. I did loads of work with Women's Aid, who are the domestic violence charity, who were unbelievably helpful with me in getting under the skin of perpetrators, essentially. And I spent a lot of time at refuges, talking to people who'd been on the receiving end of people like Charlie, and also actually talking with people who ran groups and trying to help people who do behave like that sort of change their behavior. So it was, for me, from a research point of view, it all of a sudden gave me a target. It's something with which to become an expert, and also gave me sort of room to find stuff that wasn't necessarily in the script, if you see what I mean. And what became very apparent to me very quickly was that this man was about control. And once I'd worked that out, then everything else came from it. And because it's sort of on the screen, it appeared to me that it appeared that this man was sort of violent and vindictive, but underneath that, the driving force of that was the will to control everything in his life. And for me, that was the kind of the core, the sort of the truth of the character. And once I got to that, then everything else sort of started to make an awful lot of sense.
And when you're on something like that, where you have such tight turnarounds and such, busy schedules, is that something that you sort of sit back on and go, right, I've got it now, I know it, I've got that thing, and anything else I can kind of let come to me? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for me, what is interesting about I started talking to the producers about it and to the storyliners about it, and the writers themselves were doing an awful lot of research too. And so we and soaps, when they work well, is you're filming in real time. So the writers are seeing what you're doing on the screen, and then they're writing for it. So the writing feeds, and you're seeing what the writers are doing, and then you're modifying your performance off that. So the writing feeds the acting, which feeds the writing, which feeds the acting. And you get this wonderful virtuous circle where you end up in a very different place from where you started. And it's utterly compelling when that happens. And that only happens really in soap, where the writers are writing literally in real time. And I remember talking to a director, brilliant director on who works across both Coronation Street and Emmerdale, and he kind of said to me, when you do start a soap, your first 3 months of television are essentially an extended audition, because the writers will have 3 months of storyline for you and pretty much sort of rough scripts. After that, there'll be the kind of the story conference ideas about what is coming in the next 3 months, and then longer term ideas for the next 6 months. But really what you do during those first 3 months will inform what they start to write for you. And that's always worth sort of remembering. Soaps are really wonderful things for actors, because the writers are literally writing off what you're doing in real time. And that's a real sort of, that's a perk of the job, if you like. And that's very rare that happens anywhere else. Maybe on, say, long-running television series, that might happen, where what you do in season 1 will inform what happens in season 2. But in the soap world, it's hugely compelling, I think.
And did obviously, because you came from a theatre background, you were theatre trained and theatre was your passion. Did being on a soap surprise you at all? Was it more than you thought it was going to be? And I mean that in the most respectful way, because a lot of people turn their noses up to soaps, which I think is incredibly unfair. And what you've just described sounds like the most collaborative, creative experience that you could possibly get as an actor. Did that come as a surprise to you?
That's a really good question. I wasn't sure what to expect, just because I'd never been involved in anything like this at all. And so I didn't really have many expectations of it at all, apart from, I suppose, that it was going to be quick. That's what I was expecting, and it was, but not as quick as you might imagine that it is, because these shows revolve around the quality of the writing. If you've got decent writing, it doesn't matter how fast you film it, you've always got a chance. If the writing doesn't quite work, it doesn't matter how long you've got to film it, it's always going to be tricky. And so in that kind of a way, where they put the time, it's not into the filming necessarily, but it is into the writing. So the writing goes through lots and lots of different drafts before it gets to you as an actor. And often what you're kind of getting, you've got a lot of scripts on the go. I remember sort of having 20 scripts on the go at one point on Emmerdale, which is quite a lot to hold in your head, and you're jumping around in time, and you're desperately trying to. I would always put my scripts in kind of, not in shooting order, but in story order, so that I always knew where in the story that I was. It's the writing. and you'll get the writing, often the first draft of it, about 10 days before you shoot, and you will get rewrites, often 2 days before, sometimes the night before. But those rewrites, they're generally not fundamental. They're generally cutting the odd line here and there, change the odd word here and there, the odd line. So they are things that you can deal with, and you get used to dealing with it. Your brain is like any other muscle in your body. The more you exercise it, the more efficient it becomes. And so, yeah, so in that kind of way, it taught me the importance of writing, and quality writing, if you like. And the other thing that I really learned from it was ensemble, and which you have a sense of that in the theatre, where everybody in the room, I'm doing a play with 10 other actors, at the moment it's such a tight ensemble. You just get to work with everybody, and you see the brilliant work that everybody brings to the space, and everyone's working with everybody else. And it's similar like that on the soap, partly with the other actors, but actually also with the crew, because you've got to make a lot of television in a day. And so there's a bond, not just between the actors, but also between the actors and the camera operators, the sound operators, the lighting operators, because there are parts on a set where I was doing sort of soaps where with boom microphones, it's all radio mic these days, but there'd be parts of a set where the boom operator couldn't get the boom microphone, so you couldn't land there. So you had to work out, if you were going to go through that space, how you were going to go through that space. You couldn't land in that space. So you had to time when you walked so that you didn't have to speak while you were walking through that space. And for the cameras, they could cover parts of the set, but not other parts of the set. So you couldn't land in a spot that the camera couldn't get to you. So you worked out very quickly, like this dance, and trying to make sense of it. Between you've got like 40 minutes to shoot a 2.5-page scene from the moment you walk onto set to the moment you walk off. That's what you've got. And you set it up in your original description absolutely brilliantly, really accurately. That's what you've got. So you've got a 40-minute dance where everyone works with each other, and you try and make the best piece of television that you can in that time. And Bill Tarmey, who played Jack Duckworth in Coronation Street, gave me a brilliant piece of advice very early on Coronation Street. The older actors on Coronation Street are brilliant at passing on advice, information, stuff that they've learnt over the years. And he said, don't get too worried, because I came from a very largely theatre background. I'd done the odd bit of telly on the bill, but literally no more than 1 or 2 scenes. And he said, I can see you're sort of desperately trying to do your best work all of the time. And he went, that's a brilliant thing to want to do. That the way to work in here is to do the best that you can in the time that you have. And once you work that out, you stop beating yourself up and worrying about all of the other possibilities, the what ifs. What if I'd done that differently? What if I'd done? You just have to make choices and commit to them. And so from that point of view, soaps are brilliant training, because you get to, you learn about the importance of the writing, B, you learn about the importance of working with the rest of the crew. And yeah, so it's in that kind of a way, it's, I loved it. And just about committing to an idea. You're often, I shot, Charlie Stubbs had a storyline where he split up with Shelley, the barmaid. She jilted him at the altar. They were getting married, and she rightly, he was foul. She rightly jilted him at the altar. But we had a scene in the back of a chauffeur-driven car after the wedding. And we filmed that scene before we filmed any of the wedding that preceded it. And so you just have to get yourself into that place, do your work with the script, and sort of, I think famously Bob Hoskins did that in The Last Good Friday. The scene in the back of the taxi was one of the first scenes, with Pierce Brosnan driving, was one of the first scenes that he shot, I think. And the director said to him, just imagine, you've read the script, you know what happens, just play all of that stuff in your head. And so you've got a similar thing going on. As long as you do the work, and as long as you sort of read all the scripts going up to that, you've always got a chance.
Yeah, what a great piece of advice. What fantastic piece of advice to receive from an older actor as well at a time when you
Yeah.
need it the most. I often think that you go to drama school and you learn loads, and then you learn more as you come out. But actually, where as a younger actor, I think you learn the most is by watching and listening to older actors.
Yeah, just passing on the knowledge.
Yeah.
And generally people, in my experience, everyone knows what a tough business this is. And everyone admires anyone who's
Yeah.
daring to take it on. And you're just trying to help, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And you learn things that you didn't think. I remember we both worked with a wonderful actor called Kai Owen, and I remember watching him in rehearsals. And when he took notes, no matter whether the note was constructive or praise, he just went, "Thank you."
Yeah.
And it struck me at the time. I just thought, what a great thing to do, just to say thank you, whether you're going to take it on or you're going to leave it on the floor.
Yeah.
What a great thing to do, to go thank you and then move on. Take the note. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's I love notes because they're often things that you haven't thought of, and they're always worth trying, regardless of whether you've thought of them or you may necessarily agree with them or not, because you often learn by doing them, and you kind of go, I never thought of doing that. I didn't think that would work, but goodness me, it does.
Yeah.
And often the notes are not for the benefit of your character, but for the benefit of the play.
Yeah.
And that's also really important, is because as actors, it can be quite tempting to only think of things from the point of view of your character because you are so emotionally attached to them. But actually, it's about making the entire body of work, the whole piece of work. And it's not just making the piece of work itself, but it's how that piece of work lands with an audience and telling the story as clearly as you possibly can to the audience who are going to watch it. So often notes are with loads of other kind of points of view that you might not have considered. They come with those kinds of things attached.
Yeah. So Bill, obviously moving on, it was really interesting hearing you talk about the transition of going from playing a really dark and abusive character like Charlie to then going and doing something hilarious and exercising a different muscle in Spamalot. How do you approach the sort of, as your career has progressed and you now perhaps get to choose a bit more about what you do, how do you choose the projects? What do you look for in projects?
I look for something that I haven't done for a while.
Wow.
Often. Yeah, I just try and mix it up as much as I possibly can. So one of the reasons why I jumped, we're doing the Winter's Tale here at the tobacco factories in Bristol, and one of the reasons why I jumped on this when it came up and was so keen to do it was I haven't done a Shakespeare for 15 years, but I love Shakespeare, and I did loads of it at drama school, loads of it after drama school. I've done plenty of Marlowe as well, but I haven't done a Shakespeare for 15 years. I've done stuff that's related to Shakespeare. I've done the Book of Will at Bolton Oxygen, which was about making the first folio, and I did Shakespeare in Love, which is very much about this territory and the world. I toured that, but I haven't done actual Shakespeare for quite a while. I did Prospero and the Tempest 15 years ago, and so for me it was a real, I just really wanted to get my hands dirty with it again, and it's just a wonderful world. So that, and if I haven't done much telly for a while, I'll look out for a telly project, if you see what I mean. I'm just trying to keep myself as broad as I can for as long as I can, really, and also just trying to do something that you haven't done for a while, and or maybe do something you haven't done before. Those kinds of things. I kind of like those kind of projects. Sometimes I love kind of passion projects. I did something last year, Jerry and Sewell at Newcastle Theatre Royal, which was just a complete career highlight for me. It was just glorious, and I loved it for so many reasons. It was directed by Jamie Eastlake, who's a brilliant director and producer, and he runs a fringe venue in Whitley Bay in on the outskirts of Newcastle, and he'd adapted this play from a book from 2000. And he put it on at his theatre, and sort of 50 people, 60 people. And from that, he got it into live theatre in Newcastle, which is the sort of the new writing theatre. I can't remember how many seats will be, sort of 300, 350, something of that order. And it was brilliant. And I did a workshop with him for a football related musical about 3 years ago now, and he to give me a sense of the tone of that musical, he gave me this play to read and said, read Jerry and Sewell. So I read it and I went, this musical is brilliant, but what are you doing with this this play is magnificent. And there was last October there was a musical that was meant to be touring the country that very sadly got cancelled at quite short notice. So they were looking to fill a week there, and they got in touch with they'd seen Jerry and Sewell at live theatre, and they got in touch with them and said, would you like to put this on in our theatre? And that had never happened in Newcastle Theatre Royal before, that a show had come from the Fringe and gone onto the main stage, which is seats 1300 there, 1350. And what was brilliant about that play was that it got the entire city behind it. I'm from there. And it was the most beautiful, heartfelt, funny, rude piece of writing, full of expletives and profanity. But 100% Geordie, 100% Geordie, and it was, for me, there was a monologue in there about one of the sons in the play going to the football with their dad, and it's literally word for word what I'd done with my dad 50 years previously, literally word for word what we did about walking through the park and sitting next to each other and having Bovril at half time and his arm around me. And every time that speech happened in that play, I ended up in floods of tears. It was absolutely beautiful. But everything that they did about it, sort of half the audience that came to see it had never been to the Theatre Royal before. They had flags, Newcastle United flags waving in the audience. They had AC/DC sort of for the first opening intro. They had Greg's pasties at the media night. They had Newcastle brown ale and champagne flutes. Everything about it just was magnificent, and that's just a complete career highlight for me. I've never felt so emotionally attached to a piece of work ever, and it was just beautiful, because I don't live in Newcastle anymore, but I am a fiercely, slightly posh, I admit, but nevertheless a fiercely proud Geordie, and I am from that part of the world, and for me it was just all of my Christmases come at once. I absolutely loved it.
Nice, fantastic. Bill, I could talk to you all day.
Sorry. Yes.
No. I could talk to you all day. I really could, because it's been a fascinating conversation. But I'm aware I've only got you for a finite time. So at this point in the conversation, what we usually do is ask you some quick fire questions.
Oh my God!
Just a little bit of fun. So
good luck, everyone. Yeah.
yeah. Strap in, guys. Lock the doors. So 3 things you love about your job.
Freedom, spontaneity, daring.
Oh, fantastic choices. And if you could change one thing about the industry, what would it be?
Guaranteed income.
Yeah, how's that political career going, Bill? You've just secured yourself prime ministership there.
Yeah,
absolutely. I'm all for that. Okay, so you're marooned on a desert island. You're allowed 1 play, 1 film, and 1 musical. What would you have with you?
Oh my God. 1 play, 1 film, 1 musical. Right, I'll start with a musical. Hamilton.
Yeah.
We've seen it twice. We got Disney Plus to watch it on the telly. It'll be 7 or 8 years old now. It's still groundbreaking, still extraordinary. utterly remarkable. It tears my heart into every time I watch it, but just groundbreaking on so many levels, and just a piece of musical genius. And that we watch it, we still watch it a lot. And
in our house, it's on every road trip.
Yeah.
Anywhere that's over 2 hours, it's Hamilton.
Oh, yeah, is it? Oh, how amazing. Yeah. So that I'm taking Jerry and Sewell. I'm taking Jerry and Sewell because it's beautiful, it's funny, it's rude, it's profane, but it's really about something really, really important about kids growing up in Newcastle, which is where I'm from, and the trials and tribulations of following a football team that never quite does as well as you would like it to.
Yet. There's plenty.
You never know.
There's plenty more. There's plenty of good stuff on the horizon, don't you? And so your film, what film would you take?
It's going to be a Clint Eastwood film. I grew up idolizing Clint Eastwood. I had posters of him all over my walls. It would be something like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, I think.
Great choice.
Yeah, I think I loved what he did, because it looked like he was doing absolutely nothing. And I've read all sorts of really interesting interviews with other actors around at the time who were kind of going, and lots of whispers on the set, kind of going, what's this guy doing? He's not doing anything at all. But he was doing stuff. It just wasn't immediately obvious.
Yeah.
And I grew up, and I also liked a lot of the comedies that he did. Was it Every Which Way But Lose and Any Which Way You Can, and sort of Right Turn Clyde with an orangutan and all of that. And I loved that. I loved that he would do that after he'd played Dirty Harry. Do you know what I mean? And I go, but I love the subtlety of his work, but also his daring. And how he just changed screen acting. Really, he did stuff that no one had ever done before, and also he was just really cool. Really cool. Yeah. So I'm having those, if that's all right.
Great choices. So if your dream role, any role you could play, magic wand, what would you play?
Well, I'm torn between two, I suppose. But I'm gonna go, seeing what I'm doing at the moment, Macbeth. I've never done Macbeth, and I would love to do Macbeth, the Scottish king. He's I've only recently just started saying Macbeth. I've always referred to him previously as the Scottish king, but we've got a lot of actors in our show who've worked at the RSC who say Macbeth a lot, so I kind of go, it must be all right then. So yeah, that, because he's a warrior, but he does all of the wrong things, but what he would consider to be the right reasons. And so in that kind of way, he's fascinating as a character for me, because he's conflicted. And when I was growing up and reading Shakespeare, he was the one that I was always drawn to. And I'm sort of starting to get a little bit long in the tooth to play him, but hopefully if something comes up in the next few years, I can still have a shot at him, because he's such a fabulous contradiction of loads and loads of different conflicting things. And so I'm going to go I'm going to go with him. Brackets, Willy Loman, Death of the Salesman. Because, and another conflicted character, you see. I kind of like those kind of guys who appear to be one thing, but they've got a lot of other stuff going on. And those sort of, that stuff, what's going on underneath, the stuff that you can mine from an acting point of view and get really into, and kind of, so yeah, either of those two I would be delighted.
Lovely. And then finally, Bill, can you give us an actor or a director or a casting director, someone that you think that we should all be on the lookout for, someone whose work you're a big fan of?
Oh gosh, in a sort of coming up kind
of way. That's nice.
Wow, what have I I tell you who, the director of Jerry and Sewell, Jamie Eastlake.
Nice.
who runs Laurel's Theatre in Whitley Bay. He's won an Olivier for an affiliate show in London and at the Soho Theatre, and he's a remarkable man because he's a brilliant director, but he's also a brave thinker about the business, and he's a far-sighted thinker about the business, and he cares about the business, and he cares about the business being inclusive for all sorts of humans. And so him, and because I think he's a wonderful man, and he's really exciting for North East Theatre. They've got an absolute diamond there.
Brilliant. Bill Ward, thank you so much for joining us on TapeDeck Sessions.
My absolute pleasure, Josh. Lovely to see you.